Howdy. So, the Game Awards just happened, and oh boy, is Geoff Keighley's little special awards ceremony drawing up some, attention, as it usually does, but I feel like this attention this year is much more negative than in past years. As you can tell by the thumbnail, this is going to be a more casual discussion. I'm not going to do a full analysis and all that. I just wanted to talk and chill about it, Just like a normal little conversation. When it comes to topics like this where I really just want to dive right into it immediately, I figured a more casual discussion is appropriate for this. Next week is also going to be another casual discussion like this, but based on one of the big AAA games of this year that I just finished, and I wanted to share my thoughts on it. But back to Geoff Keighley's awards. They just happened, and they came, and they went, and people were upset. Despite the usual ads and constant gacha game commercials and the awards, one thing that drew a lot of criticism this year was the fact that a lot of the awards were just quickly rushed through, more so than previous years. And even when people won awards, they were only given 30 seconds to be able to have a speech. And that's just not great for the industry, especially in a year where there's been so many layoffs and things like that. It just feels a little bit short-sighted for this award ceremony to even be structured like that. And the Game Awards have had problems every year, but I felt like they were on a little bit of a streak of improvement there for a bit. But now, I don't know, man. I just feel like there's been a lot of lost good faith, and more so just a thing of that it seems like every year people keep kind of making excuses for the Game Awards, saying like, oh, it'll get better next year. Like, this is all they need to do to improve. But I think people are now starting to get really tired of it, basically requesting the same changes every year and then seeing those changes ignored in favor of obnoxious celebrity cameos that go on way too long and advertisements that seem like they have no place in being there. Running the Game Awards is really hard, and I want to get this out of the way first. Geoff Keighley is trying his best. I think when you actually look into any interviews with Geoff Keighley, I think he really does genuinely care about the industry and the state of the industry, and he doesn't just seem like just an awards guy or an outside figure. He's been involved with the gaming industry for the last 30 years maybe of his life. You go into it, and he really has the credentials to back it up. But then the awards do so many dumb decisions that feel really like out of touch, and you just can't help but wonder what's happening. When it comes to the Game Awards, I feel like the two most important things regarding it is right there in the name. The game and the awards. I feel like the announcements, the big game announcements, are what draws people into it, but then people also want to see the special games that they love being celebrated and talked about by the developers who made it happen. And for this year, you kind of didn't get the second part of that. You just got the game part. To go into that a little bit more, let's look into the game part. We had some pretty great game announcements. The new Monster Hunter, God of War getting a surprise DLC announcement, Sega announcing a billion things like Crazy Taxi, Jet Set Radio, all of that. No Man's Sky developer showing off their next big thing. This is actually a pretty good year for all of the announcements, more so than previous years. Does anybody remember the one year where the final announcement of the show was the Fast and Furious game presented by Vin Diesel and his co-lead actress who couldn't pronounce Tekken correctly?
Me and Vin used to just literally spend all night playing Tekken fighter games or Street Fighter.
I mean, goddamn. If there's any clip I would use to sum up what's wrong with the Game Awards, it's that. So when it comes to the game part, I actually think this year did a pretty decent job of highlighting the games and the announcements. But then you look at the other half, the awards. You look at all the criticism that the Game Awards always draws every year when it comes to the excessive ads that take up so much time and the celebrity cameos that feel really out of place. And I've seen so many different takes of this on the internet, so I'm gonna try and just conjure up my own thoughts and not get it muddled up with any of the other things I've seen. But I think the celebrity cameos are fine if they're relevant to a game. Like, understandably, Anthony Mackie going up there, since he was the lead in the Twisted Metal show, I think is a fair thing. It's kind of like Pedro Pascal and Bella Ramsey presenting from last year because of their involvement in the Last of Us show. And I didn't see any criticisms about that. I just think in this case, it just more came down to how long Anthony Mackie and Simu Liu and some other actors were there up on stage, just taking up so much time. And that makes it burn even more when you go into the fact of how little time the developers got to present their awards and actually speak. Best indie game from Sea of Stars didn't even get a chance to just say anything. And man, imagine like going through all of that, developing an indie game from scratch, spending years. I think Sea of Stars was in development for like 5 to 10 years maybe, and then they finally get their award. They get the recognition that they earned, and yet they don't get the chance to speak on it and speak on their experience. And I know so many people don't even care about the awards aspect, but that is the point. It's an awards show, and if you're tuning into the Game Awards just for the announcements and you want to ignore the awards, it just feels a little icky, to not even tune in for the actual namesake. It's the Game Awards. We're supposed to celebrate these games. But this year, more so than any, it just felt like a really gross mistreatment of the awards. And usually I don't get that from Geoff Keighley. I genuinely do think that he cares about the gaming industry, but then there's so many choices behind the Game Awards that feel so bizarre, and they haven't been fixed yet. And I don't know if Geoff Keighley has talked about it at all in person or anything. I know it's really tough to run the Game Awards, and that's not even getting into the controversy behind the actual award choices and nominations themselves. You know what? Let's just dive into that right now. Cyberpunk is not an ongoing game, and I am not afraid to say that. Not only that, but they just announced that they're literally stopping work on Cyberpunk, and that update 2.1 was the final big update. That doesn't really sound like an ongoing game to me. I mean, it's a little ironic that they won ongoing game, only for them to basically announce that their game is no longer ongoing just a few weeks later. I mean, that's just funny. And then there's the whole controversy with Dave the Diver. And when Geoff Keighley was interviewed on it, he gave an answer that didn't really exactly address the issue. He said that defining an indie game can be really difficult, and I do agree with that. The term indie is thrown around so much that it's impossible to know if it refers to the budget of a game or the size of the team or so many different factors, and it's difficult to specifically define what an indie game should be. But I think with the concept of the Game Awards, they should have more direct rules that should be applied to all of the different categories. And it's super clear that they don't have any kind of like direct, hard, strict rules for any of the nominations. I mean, look at fucking Sifu getting fighting game nomination. Holy shit, is that a terrible, terrible decision? I mean, damn, dude. I guess that means the Batman Arkham games are fighting games because Batman punches people. Or I don't know. I honestly, genuinely, that's like probably the most ridiculous thing. And also, Geoff himself has stated that he doesn't really have a say in the nomination approach or the voting. He kind of apparently he just watches from the sidelines and just lets other different media outlets determine that. But I really do think that a big improvement that could happen with the Game Awards is more strict rules for the nominations, specifically going into what can and can't be nominated and why it can't be. I think that would really help with the clarifications and the controversy that surrounded Dave the Diver this year. But then you go into the issue regarding the ceremony and the awards and how people weren't given the proper time to truly speak on it. And that's a shame, man. If you go back to 2017 when Breath of the Wild won Game of the Year, that moment when the developers got to go up on stage and they were just laughing and just giddy with excitement, it was palpable and contagious. And it's a shame that we couldn't have room for any moments like that this year because everybody was just quickly rushed off stage. One of my favorite announcements of this year was that indie game by that developer who had a wonderful story and anecdote regarding his father and what it means to him to be able to come up and present this game. It's called Tales of Kenzera Zhao. I don't know if I'm pronouncing the name right, but it looked great. And the presenter of that game, I love seeing that. I love seeing these developers who are genuinely passionate about their projects go up and present their work. I don't love seeing these really weird trailers of Starfield basically just advertising that it exists. I don't know, man. I'm sure it's tough to try and like weed out different announcements and what gets included and what doesn't, but this has been going on for years now, and I don't know why the Game Awards still seemingly struggle so much with presenting themselves. It feels like they're trying to live up to different awards shows like the Oscars, but then you have moments like the Fuck the Oscars from Joseph Fares, the director of It Takes Two, who went on to create the Game of the Year for 2021. I mean, come on, man. The Game Awards aren't the Oscars. Joseph Ferris said it best himself. They're better at this point. They're independent. They're not run by big Hollywood corporations. I mean, the word independent or indie can mean a bunch of different things, right, Jeff? I don't know. I'm going in circles. I realize that. And I'm not saying anything that hasn't already been introduced to the conversation. But I don't really understand why the Game Awards still seemingly struggles with this perception when I feel like the feedback every year is so obvious and clear cut. People want to focus on the game announcements and the awards. And anytime there's something that takes away from that, like really awkward, long celebrity cameos who don't really have any business being up there because they don't actually care about the industry or gaming, or out of touch announcements, or advertisements that go on for way too long for mobile games that have billions of dollars to spend on advertisements face. I understand that the Game Awards need to be funded, but again, I do feel like there should be at least a bit of a better balance. When you look at the breakdown for the amount of time spent on the ads and celebrity cameos and all the other stuff versus the actual award speeches, it is crazy. I think I've seen some numbers that said that the speeches took up less than 10% of the total time, and the awards are like 3 hours long. It's not like they're blasting through them in 90 minutes. Maybe the Game Awards would benefit from having a much shorter runtime, so it's not as expensive to produce. You focus on the big awards, and then you give the speeches the time to actually present themselves. You don't hire as many celebrities, so you're not wasting so much money. I don't know, man. I really would like to know exactly how the money is spent. Is like 90% of the budget really just spent on like the trailers? I don't know. I'm just left wondering because every year it feels like people walk away kind of disappointed. And you know, it's kind of funny that I feel like in previous years, a bulk of the conversation surrounded what game won the actual Game Awards. And this year, it feels like we can't even focus on that because we're just spent wondering why we couldn't even have time to celebrate the awards. And that's not even to mention the fact that the state of the industry really should have been mentioned. So many people were laid off this year. So many different games got nominated for awards when hundreds of people who used to work to develop those games are no longer working on them. I mean, I think Destiny 2 got nominated for best community support and then they laid off like 80 or 90 people. I mean, that's just awful. And it's even worse that it didn't get addressed. And I know that Geoff Keighley was thinking about it. And I just doesn't feel like when you read or watch interviews regarding Geoff, you see someone who seems like he really cares about the games industry. Like he knows his stuff and he's up to date with it. But then you see stuff like this and the way he presents himself at the awards and it just feels robotic. Like he's trying to cover up something or trying desperately to look more professional to try and be like the Academy Awards. But that's the special thing about the gaming industry is that we don't have to be like that. The gaming industry is the most profitable entertainment industry right now. We're doing better than all the other awards. We don't need to stick to their rules. Maybe the Game Awards would benefit from being like a 4-hour award show. Maybe if they just gave 30 more minutes total to the awards, then you can give an extra minute to every single speech. And then you could include all of the other extraneous awards that just got rattled off, like Sea of Stars winning Best Indie Game. There's so much work that needs to be done for the Game Awards, and it's such a shame because I watch it every year and I love it. I love seeing the announcements. I like seeing the winners. I love seeing the passionate developers go up there and pour their heart out and just talk about what it means to them. I mean, think about that speech for Baldur's Gate where they were talking about either a deceased coworker or a deceased friend who had recently passed away and how much working on the game meant to them, for them to just start being played off stage. I mean, goddamn, how short-sighted can you be with that? I just feel like Geoff Keighley really needs to come up there and really needs to make a statement talking about what needs to be done and what needs to change and what needs to do better. But unfortunately, I don't really think that's gonna happen because the Game Awards gets more and more popular every year. More and more people watch it and it gets bigger every year. So I think from Geoff Keighley's perspective that whatever he's doing is working and he should just keep doing it. But that's a shame because I don't think it's working. I think the Game Awards needs to actually change because right now, with the way it's headed, it's just going to feel less and less like an actual celebration of video games and more like this corporate, industrial, gray, manufactured award ceremony that doesn't feel like it's for the gamers anymore. It doesn't feel like it's for us. It's gonna feel like it's for shareholders and presenters and big corporations and big companies that want to spend money advertising their games that nobody wants to buy. Hopefully the Game Awards can recover and start making some meaningful changes because right now it's pretty obvious that they've just been coasting by on more or less doing the same thing every year. And that's a shame, because it's special. And the developers who make these games are special, and they deserve their time up on stage. 30 seconds isn't enough.
いろいろ考えてきたんですけど、もうダメだ。忘れた。本当にゲーム作ってきてよかったです。
I'm really happy that I ended up making games.